subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Gene Mullins stood in his editing studio at 3 in the morning, reviewing footage of his latest documentary. The screen showed a tearful woman recounting how a pharmaceutical company had suppressed evidence about their drug side effects. Gene had spent 8 months tracking down whistleblowers, building an airtight case. This was his specialty, exposing those who hid behind corporate shields and legal teams, people who thought their money and connections made them untouchable. He'd been doing this work for 15 years, ever since his wife Sarah died from complications that a negligent hospital tried to bury. The settlement they'd offered was an insult wrapped in a non-disclosure agreement. Gene had refused, instead channeling his grief into a documentary that cost 3 doctors their licenses and the hospital its accreditation. That film had won awards, but more importantly, it had prevented others from suffering the same fate. His daughter Leanne had been 12 then. She'd watched her father transform from a corporate videographer into something sharper, more dangerous. Gene had raised her alone, teaching her to question authority, to stand up for herself, to never accept injustice. She'd inherited his stubborn streak and his sense of right and wrong, which made the past 2 years so painful. Leanne had met Brent Sparks at a charity gala. Gene had been immediately suspicious. Brent was too polished, too charming. He came from old money. His family owned a chain of luxury rehabilitation centers across the Southwest. The Sparks centers promised holistic healing for addiction, trauma, and mental health issues, catering to wealthy clients who wanted discretion above all else. Gene had researched them. On paper, everything looked legitimate. Accredited programs, impressive success rates, glowing testimonials. But something felt off. The few negative reviews he found online had been quickly scrubbed. Former employees who'd spoken critically had retracted their statements or disappeared from public view. He tried talking to Leanne about his concerns. She'd accused him of being overprotective, of sabotaging her happiness because he couldn't let go. "Not everyone is hiding something, Dad," she'd said. "Not every family is corrupt. The Sparks do genuine good in the world." They'd argued. Gene had pushed too hard, and Leanne had pulled away. When Brent proposed after 6 months, she'd accepted. Gene had shown up to the wedding with a smile that felt like broken glass in his mouth, had walked her down the aisle, had shaken Brent's hand. That was 18 months ago. For the first year, Leanne had seemed happy. She'd sent photos, her and Brent traveling to Europe, renovating their home, attending Sparks family events. She'd called regularly, though the conversations grew shorter, more superficial. Gene had convinced himself he'd been wrong, that his paranoia had nearly cost him his daughter. Then the calls became less frequent. When they did talk, Leanne sounded distracted, anxious. She made excuses for bruises Gene noticed on video calls. She'd taken up tennis. She was clumsy. She'd bumped into a door. Classic signs, but when Gene pressed, she'd change the subject or ended the call. 3 months ago, she'd stopped calling altogether. Gene's texts went unanswered for days. When she did respond, her messages were brief. "I'm fine. Just busy. Talk soon." Gene had driven to their house twice. Both times, Brent had answered, all smiles and apologies. "Leanne's resting. She's been under the weather. She's out with my mother. They've gotten really close." Each time, Gene had insisted on seeing her. Each time, Leanne had appeared looking pale and thin, insisting she was fine, that Gene needed to stop worrying. The second visit, he'd noticed marks on her wrist when her sleeve rode up. Before he could say anything, she pulled the fabric down and changed the subject. Now, at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, his phone rang. Gene's chest tightened when he saw Leanne's name. She never called this late. "Leanne." "Dad." Her voice was barely a whisper, shaking with terror. "Dad, please come get me. Please. I need." A crash in the background. A man's voice, angry and slurred. "I have to go. Please, Dad. Please." The line went dead. Gene was moving before his conscious mind caught up. He grabbed his keys, his phone, and, after a moment's hesitation, the small video camera he always kept charged. Old habits. The drive to the Sparks estate took 40 minutes. Gene made it in 25, his mind racing through possibilities, each worse than the last. He tried calling back. No answer. He tried texting. Nothing. The Sparks family compound sat on 15 acres outside the city, a sprawling ranch-style mansion surrounded by manicured gardens. Gene had been here once before, for a tense Sunday dinner where Brent's mother Edna had spent 2 hours making passive-aggressive comments about Gene's career. How noble, exposing people's private troubles for public entertainment, while his father Ken had mostly ignored him in favor of his phone. Gene pulled up to the gate and punched in the code Leanne had given him months ago. It worked. The gate swung open, and he drove up the long driveway, gravel crunching under his tires. Every light in the house seemed to be on. Gene was out of his car before the engine fully stopped. He took the front steps 2 at a time and tried the door. Locked. He pounded on it. Leanne, open the door. Footsteps inside. The door opened 6 inches, held by a chain. Edna Sparks peered through the gap, her silver hair perfect despite the hour, her expression coldly composed. Gene, it's nearly 4:30 in the morning. I know what time it is. Leanne called me. I want to see my daughter. Leanne is resting. She's had a difficult evening. Then I'll help her rest. Open the door, Edna. I'm afraid I can't do that. She's not leaving. Something in the way she said it. Not she's not available or she can't see you, but she's not leaving made Gene's blood run cold. That's not your decision. He kept his voice level. I'm her father. She called me for help. She's confused. She's been under tremendous stress. The family is handling it. Get out of my way. Gene, I understand your concern, but he didn't wait for her to finish. Gene stepped back and kicked the door just below the lock. The chain ripped from the frame, and the door flew inward. Edna stumbled backward with a gasp. Gene pushed past her into the marble foyer. Leanne, you can't just... This is breaking and entering. I'm calling the police. Edna's voice rose to a shriek. Call them, Gene said. Please. I'd love to have them here. He moved deeper into the house. The layout was open, modern, living room flowing into dining room, into kitchen. No Leanne. A sound from upstairs, a muffled cry. Gene ran for the staircase. Edna tried to block him, but he moved around her easily. Behind him, he heard Kent's voice joining Edna's protests, but he didn't look back. The upstairs hallway was lined with family photos. The Sparks family of various events, all smiles and expensive clothes. Gene followed the sound of voices to a closed door at the end of the hall. He tried the handle. Locked from the outside. Leanne. He pounded on the door. Dad! Her voice, closer now, desperate. Gene stepped back and kicked. The door was solid wood, but the lock was decorative. It took 3 kicks before the frame splintered and the door burst open. The room was a bedroom, expensively furnished but oddly sterile. Clinical. And in the center, Leanne sat on the floor in a thin nightgown, her arms wrapped around herself, rocking slightly. She looked up when Gene entered, and his heart shattered. His daughter, his strong, brilliant daughter, looked like a ghost. She'd lost at least 20 pounds. Her hair hung limp and unwashed. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. But it was her arms that made Gene's vision blur with rage. Burns. Dozens of them, circular and precise, running up both forearms in neat rows. Fresh ones, still blistered. Old ones, scarred over. The pattern was deliberate, methodical. This wasn't an accident or self-harm. This was torture. Oh, baby. Gene crossed to her in 3 strides and gathered her into his arms. She collapsed against him, sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have. Chill. It's okay. I've got you. I'm getting you out of here. She won't let me leave. She said if I try, they'll have me committed. She said no one would believe me because of my history. What history? The one Brent created. He's been giving me something, Dad. Pills. He said they were vitamins, but they made me foggy, paranoid. He documented everything. My mood swings, my irrational behavior. He has videos, doctor's notes. They've been building a case that I'm mentally unstable. Gene's mind raced. A gaslight operation. Classic abuser tactics, but sophisticated. Where's Brent now? Downstairs, I think. He and his brother Brian were drinking. That's when I got to my phone. I hid it weeks ago after Edna took my first one. Jean heard footsteps on the stairs. He helped Leanne to her feet. She was unsteady, and he kept his arm around her. Brent appeared in the doorway, his expensive shirt untucked, his eyes bloodshot. Behind him, his brother Brian, nearly identical except for a scar on his chin. Both of them blocked the exit. Jean. Brent's voice was slurred but carried a thread of amusement. Breaking and entering. Assault on my mother. You're really not helping Leanne's case here. Get out of my way. Can't do that. Leanne's sick. She needs help. Professional help. We've already made arrangements. You've been torturing her. Jean's voice was quiet, deadly. Those burns on her arms. That's not help. That's abuse. Brent glanced at Leanne's arms and shrugged. Unfortunate side effects of her condition. She's been self-harming. We try to stop her, but she's very determined. That's a lie, Leanne whispered. Is it? Brent pulled out his phone. Because I have video of you doing exactly that. Dated and time-stamped. Jean felt Leanne tense. He staged it, she said. He drugged me, and then... See. Brent addressed Jean as if Leanne hadn't spoken. Paranoid delusions. Blame shifting. Classic symptoms. We have 3 psychiatrists ready to testify that Leanne needs inpatient treatment. At our facility, of course. We'll take excellent care of her. Understanding crashed over Jean. This wasn't just about control. The Spark Centers. They'd done this before. Found vulnerable people, broken them down, committed them to their facilities where they could do whatever they wanted without oversight. How many others? Jean asked. Brent's smile widened. I have no idea what you mean. How many other people have you done this to? How many patients in your centers are there because you manufactured a mental illness? That's a serious accusation. You should be careful. Slander is expensive. Jean pulled out his phone and started recording. Say that again. Brian moved forward. Put that away. Or what? You'll burn me too? Add me to your collection? Jean kept the camera steady on Brent. Leanne called me for help. I found her locked in a room, covered in burns. That's imprisonment and assault. The police are going to want to see this. The police are family friends, Edna said from behind her sons. She'd regained her composure. Chief Morrison's daughter received treatment at our center. Free of charge. He's very grateful. And State Senator Harding's son, Kent added, appearing beside his wife. And Judge Patterson's wife. We're very well connected, Jean. Whatever you think you saw here, whatever story you think you have, it won't go anywhere. Jean looked at the 4 of them, Brent and Brian blocking the door, Edna and Kent behind them. A family united in corruption. How many people had they destroyed? How many families had they torn apart? Leanne, he said quietly. Can you walk? I think so. Good. We're leaving. I don't think so, Brent said. Jean met his eyes. You can try to stop us. But you're drunk, and there are 2 of you and 1 of me. Someone's going to get hurt. And when the ambulance comes, when the police come, Leanne's injuries are going to need explanation. All of this, he gestured at the room, the locks, the clinical setup, is going to need explanation. We've already explained it, Edna said coldly. Leanne is mentally ill. She's dangerous to herself. We were trying to help her when her father broke in and assaulted us. That story works if Leanne's here, Jean said. It falls apart if she's somewhere safe, giving her own statement, showing her injuries to doctors you don't control. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Jean made his decision. He lifted Leanne into his arms. She weighed almost nothing and started walking toward the door, toward Brent and Brian. Stop, Brent said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Jean didn't stop. He walked straight at them, and at the last second, Brian stepped aside. Brent grabbed for Leanne, but Jean twisted away. They were past them in the hallway. Brian, don't let them, Edna's voice sharp. Jean heard footsteps behind him. He moved faster, taking the stairs as quickly as he dared with Leanne in his arms. The front door was still open from where he'd kicked it in. Behind them, Brian was shouting something. Jean made it to his car and set Leanne gently in the passenger seat. He ran around to the driver's side. A hand grabbed his shoulder. Brian. Jean spun and drove his fist into the man's stomach. Brian doubled over, wheezing. Jean got in the car, started the engine, and floored it. In his rearview mirror, he saw the Sparks family standing in their doorway, backlit by their mansion's lights. Watching. They didn't chase. They didn't need to. They thought they'd already won. Gene pulled out his phone and handed it to Leanne. Call 911. Tell them you're a victim of domestic violence and you need to go to the hospital. Tell them you've been held against your will. Leanne's hand shook as she took the phone. And Leanne? Tell them you want to go to County General. Not any hospital the Sparks family recommends. She nodded and made the call. Gene drove toward the city, his mind already working. The Sparks had money, connections, and a prefabricated narrative. They've been doing this for years, maybe decades. But Gene had spent 15 years taking down people who thought they were untouchable. He knew how to investigate, how to find evidence, how to build a case that couldn't be ignored. More than that, he knew how to hurt them where it mattered. The Sparks family had just made a catastrophic mistake. They'd targeted his daughter, and Gene Mullins didn't forgive. He didn't forget. He documented, he exposed, and he destroyed. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. County General's emergency room was understaffed and overworked at 5 in the morning, but the nurse who took Leanne back had kind eyes and a professional demeanor that put Gene slightly at ease. He'd explained the situation, domestic violence, possible drugging, clear evidence of sustained abuse. The nurse had nodded, photographed Leanne's injuries, and started a rape kit protocol despite Leanne's insistence that Brent had never touched her that way. Better to rule it out, the nurse had said gently. Gene had wanted to stay with Leanne, but hospital policy separated them. He was left in the waiting room, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his hands bruised from punching Brian, his mind churning. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You've made a serious mistake. Return Leanne immediately, and we'll forget this happened. Gene deleted it without responding. Another buzz. This time a photo. It showed Gene's front door with a very clear message. We know where you live. Instead of fear, Gene felt something click into place. Threats meant they were worried. Worried meant vulnerable. He opened his phone's recording app and reviewed the footage he'd captured. Brent's smug admission, Edna's statement about their police connections, Kent's casual mention of bribing public officials with free treatment. It wasn't enough to prosecute. Any decent lawyer would have it suppressed, but it was enough to start. Gene opened his laptop and began working. First, he created encrypted backups of the video and uploaded them to 3 separate secure servers. Then he started researching. The Spark Centers had 5 locations across the Southwest. Gene pulled up their corporate filings, their licensing records, their staff lists. He cross-referenced names with social media, looking for employees who'd left, particularly ones who departed on bad terms. He found 7 in the first hour. 3 had posted vague complaints on job review sites before deleting them. 2 had filed wrongful termination suits that were settled out of court with NDAs. 1 had died by suicide 6 months after leaving. That last one stopped him cold. Paula Chun, licensed therapist, age 34. Her obituary mentioned her commitment to her patients and her family's grief. Nothing about why someone so young and apparently dedicated had taken her own life. Gene dug deeper. Paula's sister had started a blog in her memory, processing her grief publicly. In one post from 2 years ago, she'd written, Paula told me she saw things at her last job that kept her from sleeping. She wanted to speak up, but they threatened her career. She was so scared. I think that fear killed her more than anything else. Gene noted the sister's name, Melissa Chun, and location. San Diego. A 2-hour drive. A doctor appeared in the waiting room. Mr. Mullins? Gene stood. How is she? Physically, she'll recover. The burns are consistent with repeated contact with a heated implement, possibly a lighter or small torch. Some will scar. We've treated and bandaged them. She's dehydrated and malnourished, but we're giving her fluids now. And the drugs? We did a full tox screen. She has several substances in her system, a benzodiazepine, an antipsychotic, and something we're still identifying. It's a troubling combination, especially for someone who shouldn't be taking any of them. Can you document all of this? Already done. We've also contacted social services and the police as required in abuse cases. A detective will want to speak with both of you. Gene tensed. What precinct? Central. What? Not Morrison's precinct, then. That was something. Can I see her? In a few minutes. She's asking for you. The doctor left. Gene's phone rang. His business partner, Marcus Webb. Gene, where are you? We have a network meeting at 9. Gene had completely forgotten. They were pitching their pharmaceutical expose to a streaming platform. 8 months of work, a potential 6-figure deal. I can't make it. Family emergency. What? Gene, we can't reschedule this. They're flying in from. You'll have to do it without me. A pause. This is about Leanne, isn't it? What happened? Marcus was one of the few people Gene fully trusted. They'd been partners for 7 years, working on a dozen documentaries together. Marcus was the producer who smoothed edges while Gene did the digging. It's bad, Marcus. Her husband's family. They've been abusing her. Systematically. I think it's bigger than just Leanne. Jesus. What do you need? Time. And maybe your research skills. I'll send you some names. Done. Go take care of your daughter. I'll handle the network. After they hung up, a nurse led Gene to Leanne's room. She was in a hospital bed, and in her arm, bandages covering the burns. She looked small and young, like she had a 12 when Sarah died. Hey, Dad. Her voice was hoarse. Gene pulled a chair beside her bed and took her hand carefully, avoiding the bandages. Hey, baby. How are you feeling? Scared. They're going to come for me, aren't they? Probably. But you're safe here. I'm not leaving. I'm so stupid. You warned me about Brent, about his family, and I didn't listen. I thought you were just being overprotective, and now. Stop. This isn't your fault. They're professionals at this. They've been doing it for years. Leanne looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Gene explained what he'd found. The former employees, Paula Chun, the pattern of people leaving the Spark Centers under suspicious circumstances. They kill people? Leanne whispered. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. He squeezed her hand gently. Leanne, I need you to tell me everything. From the beginning. When did things change? She took a shaky breath. About 6 months after we got married. Brent started coming home late, drinking more. When I asked about it, he'd get angry. Not violent, just cold. Dismissive. Then Edna started inviting me to lunch, just the two of us. She was so nice at first. Sympathetic. She said Brent was under pressure from the family business, that I needed to be more supportive. When did the drugs start? Maybe 8 months ago? Brent said I seemed anxious, that I should try these vitamins his family centers used. I trusted him. She laughed bitterly. They made me foggy. I'd lose time. Forget conversations. Brent started documenting it, taking videos of me when I was confused, making it seem like I was delusional. And the burns? Leanne's face went pale. That started 3 months ago. Edna did it. She said it was a therapeutic technique. That pain could break through my mental blocks. She'd heat up this metal tool and press it to my arms. Brent would hold me down. Sometimes Brian would watch. Gene felt his rage crystallize into something cold and focused. Did they ever say why? Why you specifically? Edna said I was perfect. Young, isolated from my father, trusting. She said I'd be a good test case for their new program. What program? I don't know exactly, but I heard them talking once. Something about expansion, using their methods on more patients. Edna said if they could break me, the daughter of Gene Mullins, documentary filmmaker, then they could break anyone. It was like I was a trophy. Of course, they hadn't just targeted Leanne for Brent's satisfaction. They'd targeted her because of Gene, to prove they could. A knock at the door. A woman in a rumpled suit entered, Detective Laura McIntyre, according to her badge. Mr. Mullins? Ms. Mullins? I need to take your statements about what happened tonight. Gene stood. Before we do that, I need to know something. Are you familiar with the Sparks family? McIntyre's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Everyone knows the Sparks. Big donors. Prominent family. Do you know Chief Morrison? Now she frowned. We work in different precincts, but yes. What? Gene made a decision. Because the Sparks family just told me that Morrison is in their pocket. That they've bought off judges and senators. I need to know if I can trust you before my daughter says anything on record. For a long moment, McIntyre studied him. Then she closed the door and pulled a chair closer. I'm going to be honest with you. Morrison and I don't get along. He's old school, plays politics, cares more about his clearance rate than actual justice. If the Sparks family is pull with him, I'm not surprised. So we can't trust the police, Leanne said quietly. You can trust me, McIntyre said firmly. Look, I've been a cop for 12 years. I've seen a lot of abuse cases. Rich families think money makes them untouchable. Sometimes they're right, but I don't care how connected they are. You tell me what happened, I'll document it, and I'll build a case, even if it doesn't go anywhere. Jean asked, even then, because eventually patterns emerge. Eventually, someone breaks ranks. Eventually, the truth comes out. She pulled out a notebook. Now, Ms. Mullins, can you walk me through your relationship with Brent Sparks? Leanne talked for an hour. McIntyre took detailed notes, asked careful questions, and showed no judgment. By the end, her expression was grim. This is enough for an arrest warrant on Brent for assault and unlawful imprisonment. Probably Edna Sparks, too, for the burns. The drugging is trickier without knowing exactly what they gave you, but we're working on it. They'll lawyer up immediately, Jean said. Let them. I've arrested rich people before. They bleed just like everyone else when you cut through their shields. After McIntyre left with a promise to return with updates, Jean sat with Leanne until she drifted off to sleep. Her face, even in rest, was troubled. Jean stepped into the hallway and called Marcus back. How'd the meeting go? Good, actually. They want to move forward. They're excited about the project. A pause. How's Leanne? She'll survive. Marcus, I need to ask you something. How would you feel about putting the pharmadoc on hold for a few months? Why? Because I'm going after the Sparks family. And I need your help. Jean, we're so close to. I know. And I'm sorry. But this is my daughter. They tortured her, Marcus. And I think they've done it to others. This could be the biggest story we've ever told. Silence. Then what do you need? Jean smiled grimly. Everything we've got. 2 days later, Leanne was released from the hospital with strict instructions to follow up with specialists. Jean had transformed his home office into a command center, covering the walls with photos, timelines, and connection maps. Marcus arrived with his laptop and 3 boxes of files. I reached out to Paula Chen's sister, Marcus said, setting up his workstation. She'll meet with us. She's been waiting for someone to ask about Paula for 2 years. Good. What about the other former employees? 2 agreed to talk off the record. 3 aren't responding. 1 threatened to call their lawyer if I contacted them again. Fear or complicity? Could be either. Jean had spent the last 48 hours building a comprehensive profile of the Sparks family and their business empire. What he'd found was disturbing. The Sparks centers generated approximately $50 million annually across their 5 locations. They specialized in long-term residential treatment for addiction, trauma, and mental health issues. Their client list was private, but Jean had found clues in society pages and charitable donation records. CEOs, politicians, family members, celebrities seeking rest and discretion, people who could pay premium rates for privacy. The centers were licensed and accredited, but Jean noticed something interesting. The state inspections were always scheduled and brief. The same inspector handled all 5 locations. Dr. Nathan Snyder, a psychiatrist who'd left private practice 10 years ago to work for the state licensing board. Jean pulled Snyder's financials. 3 years ago, Snyder had bought a vacation home in Aspen for $1.2 million cash on a civil servant salary. Marcus, add Dr. Snyder to the corruption map. The detective, McIntyre, had gotten her warrants, but the arrest had gone sideways. Brent and Edna had turned themselves in with a team of expensive lawyers. They'd been processed and released on bail within 4 hours. Their statement to the press painted Leanne as mentally ill and Jean as an overprotective father who'd assaulted them. Worse, Judge Patterson, one of the judges Ken had mentioned, had issued a restraining order preventing Jean from contacting any member of the Sparks family. McIntyre had called that morning, frustrated. The DA is waffling. He says it's he said, she said. Brent's lawyers submitted their evidence of Leanne's mental instability. Fake medical records, but well forged. What do you need? Jean had asked. A pattern. More victims. Something that makes this impossible to ignore. Which brought Jean to his current task. Finding those other victims. He'd identified 43 people who'd been patients at Sparks centers in the last 5 years and subsequently died by suicide, overdose, or accident. 43 was high, but not statistically impossible for treatment centers dealing with high-risk populations. What was suspicious was how many of those deaths had come after patients tried to leave treatment early or filed complaints. Jean started making calls. Some families hung up immediately. Some cried. Some got angry. But 3 families talked. A mother in Phoenix whose son had died of an overdose 3 weeks after leaving the Scottsdale Sparks Center. He was doing so well, she said. 2 years sober. Then he went to Sparks for what they called a wellness tune-up. He came out paranoid, agitated. They said it was a relapse. But Alex swore to me he hadn't used. 2 weeks later, he's dead. The autopsy said he injected enough fentanyl to kill a horse. My son was terrified of needles. He'd never inject anything. A father in Santa Fe whose daughter had died in a hiking accident after trying to escape from the Spark Center there. Melissa was an experienced hiker. They said she fell. But when I finally saw her body, she had bruises consistent with a struggle. I tried to push for an investigation, but the sheriff shut me down. Said the medical examiner ruled it accidental. A sister in Tucson whose brother had committed suicide in his apartment, alone, after filing a complaint with the state licensing board about abuse at the Spark Center. His complaint had been dismissed. He died 2 weeks later. David left a note, she said, but it didn't sound like him. The handwriting was his, but the words, they talked about guilt and shame. David never felt guilty. He was angry. He wanted justice. Jean documented everything. Names, dates, circumstances. Patterns emerged. Patients who complained or tried to leave early. Families who pushed back. Deaths that were suspicious but officially ruled as suicide, accident, or overdose. And in every case, the investigations had been brief and conclusive. No follow-up. No deeper questions. They're killing people, Leanne said quietly. She'd been listening from the couch, where she was recovering. That's what they do. They break people down in their centers, and if anyone tries to expose them, they make them disappear. I think you're right, Jean said. But I need proof. Suspicions aren't enough. His phone rang. Melissa Chun. Mr. Mullins, thank you for agreeing to meet. Can you come tomorrow? Absolutely. What time? Morning would be best. I have something to show you. Something Paula left behind. Jean arranged a drive to San Diego the next morning. That night, he sat with Leanne and reviewed everything they had so far. It's a lot of circumstantial evidence, Marcus said. But it's building. We need someone from inside, Jean said. A current employee. Someone who'll talk. You think any exist? Everyone has a breaking point. The Sparks family pushes people past theirs all the time. One of their employees has to have reached it. Leanne sat forward. Dad, I might know someone. Carolina Wells. She was a therapist there. She was kind to me. When I was in the center, before they moved me to the house, she'd slip me extra food. Give me books to read. Small things. Brent had her fired for it. When, 2 months ago, Jean looked at Marcus. Can you find her? On it. While Marcus worked, Jean's phone buzzed with another threatening text. This time from Brent's number. You're making things worse for Leanne. Drop this, and we'll get her the help she needs. Continue, and we'll have to take more drastic measures. Jean screenshot the text and forwarded it to McIntyre. Then he sent his own response. Come at me, and I'll bury you. The reply came fast. You can't touch us. We're untouchable. Jean smiled. That's what they all said, right before he destroyed them. Marcus looked up from his laptop. Found her. Carolina Wells, age 32, licensed therapist. She's been unemployed since leaving Sparks. Lives about 20 minutes from here. No phone number listed, but I have an address. Let's pay her a visit tomorrow after I get back from San Diego. That night, Jean couldn't sleep. He stood in his office, studying the wall of evidence. The Sparks family thought they were safe behind their money and connections. They'd spent years perfecting their system. Destroy people, kill the ones who fought back, buy off anyone who could stop them. But they'd never encountered someone like Jean. Someone who knew how to investigate, how to build a narrative, how to weaponize truth. More than that, they'd never faced someone with nothing left to lose. Jean would burn his career to the ground if it meant justice for Leanne. He'd spend every penny. He'd risk everything. Because some things mattered more than money or success or safety. Family mattered. Truth mattered. Justice mattered. And the Sparks family was about to learn what happened when they targeted the wrong person's daughter. Gene pulled out his camera and began recording. This was how all his documentaries started, with a statement of purpose, a promise to the audience. "My name is Gene Mullins," he said to the lens. 18 months ago, my daughter married into the Sparks family. I had doubts, but I trusted her judgment. I was wrong. The Sparks family runs rehabilitation centers across the Southwest. They claim to help people. Instead, they torture them, drug them, and kill anyone who tries to expose them. They hurt my daughter, and I'm going to make them pay. He stopped recording and backed up the file. Then he started planning. The Sparks family thought they were hunters. They'd stalked Leanne, studied her, trapped her. They didn't realize they'd caught a tiger's cub. Now the tiger was coming for them. And Gene Mullins didn't just bite back. He went for the throat. Melissa Chin's house was a small bungalow in a quiet San Diego neighborhood. She answered the door before Gene could knock, as if she'd been watching for him. "Mr. Mullins, come in." She was in her early 40s, wearing jeans and a faded UCLA sweatshirt. Her eyes were sad but fierce. Gene recognized that look. He'd seen it in the mirror after Sarah died. "Thank you for seeing me. You're the first person who's asked about Paula in 2 years. Everyone else wanted me to move on. Stop making trouble." She led him to a small office lined with boxes. "These are Paula's things. I couldn't bring myself to go through them. But after you called, I started looking." She pulled out a laptop. Paula kept journals. "They're encrypted, but I figured out her password." Melissa's voice cracked. "It was my birthday." She always remembered. She opened a file and turned the screen toward Gene. The journal entries were dated, detailed, and horrifying. Paula Chun had started working at the Scottsdale Sparks Center 3 years ago, excited about helping people recover. Within weeks, she noticed inconsistencies. Patients showing symptoms that didn't match their diagnoses. Medication records that didn't align with treatment plans. Patients who complained about abuse, but whose complaints were never investigated. One entry from 18 months before her death read, "I confronted Dr. Lehman about the discrepancies today. He told me to stop asking questions if I valued my career. When I pressed, he got specific. I could end up like the patient in Building C who fell down the stairs. I thought he was exaggerating. Then I checked the records. Building C is single story. There are no stairs." Gene photographed each page with his phone while Melissa watched. Another entry, 1 month before Paula's death. "I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Melissa. If something happens to me, will she understand why I couldn't just walk away? I have copies of everything now. Patient files, medication logs, internal memos. I'm going to take them to the state board next week. I'm terrified, but I can't let this continue." "Did she make it to the state board?" Gene asked. "She had an appointment scheduled. She died the night before." "Ow." "They said she took pills. Lots of them. Washed down with vodka. But Paula didn't drink. She was allergic to alcohol. It gave her migraines." Melissa's hands clenched. "I told the police. They didn't care. The medical examiner ruled it's suicide. Case closed." "Did Paula mention where she kept the copies of the files?" "Her apartment. But I cleared it out after. There was nothing." Gene thought for a moment. "Did she have a storage unit? A safe deposit box? Anywhere else she might hide something?" Melissa's eyes widened. "Her office. At the university where she did her graduate work. She kept an office there. She'd volunteer sometimes, mentoring students. I never checked it. Can you get me in? I still have her keys. I kept them, I don't know why." They drove to the university together. Paula's office was in the psychology building, a small room she'd shared with another adjunct. The current occupant was out. Melissa unlocked the door, and they entered. The office was generic: desk, bookshelf, filing cabinet. Gene started searching methodically. Drawers behind books, under furniture. Nothing. Then he noticed the ceiling tile above the desk was slightly crooked. He stood on the desk and pushed the tile up. Inside, a cardboard box. Got it. Inside were USB drives, labeled and dated. Gene counted 6. There were also printed files, hundreds of pages of patient records, internal emails, and what looked like financial documents. "She really did copy everything," Melissa whispered. Gene flipped through the files. Patient intake forms with forged diagnoses. Medication schedules designed to induce compliance, not healing. Internal memos discussing difficult patients who needed special handling. And financial records showing payments to state inspectors, local police, and public officials. This was it. This was the evidence they needed. Melissa, I need to take all of this. I promise I'll use it to make sure Paula didn't die for nothing. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Destroy them. Please. For Paula. I will. Gene drove back to his home with the box secured in his trunk like it was made of diamonds. He called Marcus. We have it. Paula Chun documented everything. Patient abuse, medical fraud, bribery, probably murder. Jesus. That's Gene. This is massive. We need to be careful. If the Sparks find out, they will. Soon. But by then, it'll be too late. When Gene arrived home, Leanne was waiting with news of her own. Carolina Wells called. She wants to meet. Tonight. Gene felt pieces clicking into place. Where? A coffee shop downtown. 8 o'clock. She said to come alone. No chance. I'm not letting you out of my sight. Dad. She specifically said she won't talk if you're there. She's scared. Marcus intervened. I'll go with Leanne. I'll stay close, but out of sight. If anything feels wrong, we leave immediately. Gene didn't like it, but Carolina was a key witness. If she'd talk, they'd have insider testimony to corroborate Paula's documents. Fine, but you check in every 15 minutes. At 7:30, Marcus and Leanne left. Gene stayed behind, uploading Paula's files to his encrypted servers and beginning to catalog the evidence. The patient records were damning. At least 24 people who'd been admitted with mild anxiety or addiction issues and been systematically broken down through a combination of drugs, isolation, and psychological abuse. Several had died. Others had left the centers as shells of themselves, too damaged to function. The financial records showed systematic bribery. Dr. Snyder received $50,000 every quarter. Chief Morrison got $25,000 plus free treatment for his daughter. Judge Patterson received $100,000 a year, disguised as consulting fees. Gene's phone rang. Marcus, we've got her. Carolina's talking. She's confirming everything. The drugging protocols, the abuse, the cover-ups. Gene, she has names. Staff members who participated. Patients who were killed. Recorded. Already am. Gene exhaled. They were building a case that couldn't be ignored. Evidence, witnesses, a clear pattern of criminal behavior. But something bothered him. This was almost too easy. The Sparks family had spent years covering their tracks, destroying evidence, silencing witnesses. Why would Carolina suddenly decide to talk? Why now? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo. It showed Marcus and Leanne sitting in a coffee shop with Carolina. Taken from outside, through the window. Then another text. Did you really think we wouldn't be watching? Gene's blood ran cold. He called Marcus. Voicemail. He tried Leanne. Same. He grabbed his keys and ran. The coffee shop was 15 minutes away. Gene made it in 8, running red lights and weaving through traffic. He pulled up outside and saw Marcus's car still parked. The coffee shop was closed. Dark. Gene got out and tried the door. Locked. He peered through the window. Empty. He called McIntyre. I need help. My daughter and my partner were meeting a witness. Now they're gone. What's the address? Gene gave it. McIntyre promised to send units immediately. Gene circled the building, looking for any sign of where they'd gone. In the alley behind the coffee shop, he found Marcus's phone, cracked and lying in a puddle. Then he heard his own phone ring. Brent's number. Looking for Leanne? Brent's voice was smug. Don't worry. She's safe. For now. She's back where she belongs. If you touch her, you'll what? You've already broken into my home, assaulted my family, and stolen my wife. I think we're past threats, Gene. What do you want? Everything you've collected. Every document. Every recording. Every piece of evidence. Bring it all to the Scottsdale Sparks Center. Alone. Tonight. Where Leanne learns what real pain feels like. Let me talk to her. A pause. Then Leanne's voice, terrified. Dad, don't. The line cut off. Gene stood in the alley, rain starting to fall, his mind racing. They had Leanne. They probably had Marcus too. and they wanted him to hand over the only leverage he had. If he went to the police, the Sparks would disappear Leanne before anyone could find her. If he gave them the evidence, they'd kill all three of them. There was only one option. Gene got in his car and started driving toward Scottsdale. But he wasn't bringing the evidence. He was bringing a war. The Scottsdale Sparks Center sat on 10 acres of desert landscape, designed to look like a luxury resort. Adobe-style buildings arranged around a central courtyard. Fountains, desert gardens, high walls topped with decorative ironwork that was really security fencing. Gene had studied the layout during his research. 5 patient buildings, an administration building, staff quarters, and a medical facility. Underground, there was a basement level that wasn't on public blueprints but showed up in electrical permits, probably where they kept difficult patient away from prying eyes. It was nearly midnight. Gene parked at the main gate and stepped out. The guard booth was empty, but the gate opened automatically as he approached. He was expected. Gene walked through the courtyard, carrying a laptop bag. Inside were Paula's documents and recordings, but not the originals. Copies. The real evidence was distributed across multiple servers and sent to 3 journalists with instructions to publish if Gene didn't check in by morning. The administration building's front door opened. Edna Sparks stood there, flanked by 2 security guards. Gene, prompt as always. Do you have what we asked for? Where's Leanne? Safe. Show me the evidence first. Gene opened the laptop and displayed files. Edna examined them. Her expression unreadable. This is everything. Everything. She nodded to the guards. They moved toward Gene, but he held up his hand. Not until I see Leanne and Marcus. Alive. Edna considered this, then shrugged. Very well. Follow me. She led him through the building, past luxurious common areas and treatment rooms, to an elevator. They descended. The basement level was completely different from upstairs. Sterile, cold, more prison than resort. Edna unlocked a door. Inside, Leanne and Marcus were zip-tied to chairs. Both looked roughed up but alive. Carolina Wells sat in a third chair, unrestrained, looking guilty. I'm sorry, Carolina said to Leanne. They have my daughter. They said if I didn't help. Shut up, Edna snapped. She turned to Gene. As you can see, they're fine. Now, hand over the laptop. Gene sat on a table and stepped back. Edna took it, examined the contents again, then passed it to one of the guards. Delete everything. Check his cloud accounts too. The guard sat down and started typing. Brent entered the room, drink in hand. Gene, glad you could join us. Saves us the trouble of hunting you down. Let them go, Gene said. You have what you want. Do we? Brent smiled. See, here's the problem. You're a very persistent man. You've proven that. Even if we delete all of this, even if we make the 3 of you disappear, you've probably left copies somewhere. Insurance policies. Dead man switches. Smart, Gene said. So we need a more permanent solution. Leanne stays with us. We'll continue her treatment until she's properly compliant. You and your friend Marcus? Well, accidents happen in the desert. Gene had expected this. And how will you explain 3 missing people? The police know I came here. Do they? Because I don't think you called them. I think you came alone, trying to be a hero. Brent moved closer. See, tomorrow morning, Carolina will report that you came to the center looking for Leanne, clearly unstable. We'll show security footage of you attacking staff. You'll have disappeared into the desert, probably a suicide. Marcus too. He came looking for you. Poor fool. Leanne will be too mentally ill to contradict the story. You've thought of everything. We always do. Except one thing. Brent frowned. What? I didn't come alone. As if on cue, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in red. The guard at the laptop looked up. Sir, someone's broadcasting our security feeds live. It's going out on every. An explosion rocked the building. Distant, but strong enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Gene smiled. That would be the FBI executing their warrant. What? Edna's composure finally cracked. Detective McIntyre? She's been working with federal agents for weeks. See, the Spark Centers accept Medicare and Medicaid. Federal funding. Which means fraud here is a federal crime. So is kidnapping across state lines, which you did when you grabbed Marcus from Arizona and brought him to Nevada. Brent lunged for Gene, but Gene was ready. He sidestepped and drove his elbow into Brent's face. Brent went down hard. The guards moved, but the door burst open. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded in, weapons drawn. FBI, nobody move. Detective McIntyre entered behind them, wearing a bulletproof vest. Gene Mullins, you're under arrest for. Actually, you know what? Forget it. Someone cut these people loose. Agents freed Leanne and Marcus. Leanne ran to Gene, and he held her tight. Ow, she whispered. When you and Marcus went to meet Carolina, I called McIntyre. We'd already been coordinating with the FBI. The meeting was bait to see if the Sparks would grab you. They did, and that gave the feds probable cause for a full raid. You used us as bait. Marcus looked more impressed than angry. I had agents watching you the whole time. The moment the Sparks made their move, the feds moved too. I just had to give them time to assemble the team and get warrants. McIntyre approached Edna, who stood frozen. Edna Sparks, you're under arrest for kidnapping, assault, fraud, and about 15 other charges. You have the right to remain silent. As the agents cuffed the Sparks family and their security team, Gene felt something release in his chest. It wasn't over. There would be trials, testimony, years of legal battles. But the Sparks were caught. The evidence was preserved. The victims would have justice. More FBI agents were bringing up patients from other basement rooms. Some of them were clearly drugged, confused. Others looked relieved, crying at being found. One agent approached Gene. Sir, you should know, we found evidence of at least 12 murders connected to this facility. We'll need your full cooperation. You have it. All of it. The agent nodded and moved on. Leanne looked up at Gene. Is it really over? The first part is. Now we make sure they never hurt anyone again. The trials took 18 months. The media coverage was relentless. Gene's documentary, which he finished with Marcus's help, premiered on a major streaming platform to critical acclaim and millions of views. It told the complete story, Paula Chen's investigation, the systematic abuse, the murders, and the final takedown. The evidence was overwhelming. Brent Sparks was convicted of assault, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. He got 25 years. Edna Sparks, the architect of the abuse program, got 30. Kent received 15 for his role in the bribery scheme. Brian got 12 for assault and aiding and abetting. Dr. Snyder, Chief Morrison, and Judge Patterson were all indicted. Morrison took a plea deal and testified against the others. Patterson fought and lost, getting 10 years for corruption. Snyder killed himself before trial. The Sparks centers were shut down. Assets were seized and sold, with proceeds going to victim compensation funds. 32 people came forward with abuse claims. All received settlements. More importantly, the case triggered investigations in similar facilities nationwide. Regulations were tightened. Oversight increased. It didn't fix everything, but it helped. For Gene, the victory was personal. Leanne moved back home while she healed, physically and emotionally. The burns scarred, but she wore them now as proof of survival. She'd started therapy with a trauma specialist and was slowly rebuilding herself. Marcus had taken some bruises during the kidnapping, but recovered quickly. He joked that it was the most exciting production they'd ever worked on. Carolina Wells testified against the Sparks family in exchange for immunity. Her daughter was safe. She'd started working at a legitimate therapy center, determined to do right by her patients. Melissa Chun attended every day of the trials. When Edna Sparks was sentenced, Melissa stood in the courtroom gallery and said one word, Paula. Gene understood. This wasn't just about Leanne. It was about all of them. Every victim. Every family destroyed. Every person the Sparks family had hurt. On the day the verdicts came in, Gene and Leanne stood outside the courthouse as reporters shouted questions. Gene raised a hand for quiet. 2 years ago, my daughter called me for help. What I found was a system designed to hurt vulnerable people and silence anyone who spoke up. Today, that system is destroyed. The Sparks family will spend decades in prison. But this isn't just about one family. It's about all the families like them. People who think money and power make them untouchable. He looked directly at the cameras. I made a promise to document truth and seek justice. I've kept that promise. If you're out there hiding behind wealth or connections, believing you can hurt people without consequence, watch what happened here. Because I'm not the only one paying attention. Eventually, the truth comes out. Eventually, you pay. The reporters erupted with follow-up questions, but Gene turned away. He'd said what he needed to say. Leanne linked her arm through his as they walked to his car. What's next for Gene Mullins, documentary filmmaker? Honestly, I'm thinking about something lighter. Maybe a nature documentary. Penguins. Penguins are nice. She laughed. A real laugh, the first he'd heard in months. You'd be bored in a week. Probably. But I need a break from fighting monsters. Until the next one shows up. Until then, they drove home through the city as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Gene thought about Sarah, about Paula Chun, about all the people who'd been lost along the way. He thought about justice and revenge and the thin line between them. He'd crossed that line. He'd used Leanne and Marcus as bait. He'd manipulated the Sparks family into a trap. He'd been willing to do whatever it took to destroy them. Was that justice? Or was it something darker? In the end, Gene decided it didn't matter. The Sparks family had tortured his daughter. They'd killed innocent people. They'd corrupted officials and destroyed lives. And now they were gone. If that made Gene a monster too, he could live with it. Because some things mattered more than moral purity. Some things demanded a response that went beyond law and procedure. Family mattered. Truth mattered. And sometimes, revenge mattered too. Gene Mullins had learned that lesson well. And he taught it to the Sparks family in a way they'd never forget. As they pulled into the driveway, Leanne's phone buzzed. She read the message and smiled. What is it? Carolina. She's organizing a support group for Sparks Center survivors. She wants to know if I'll help. Will you? I think so. It feels like the right next step. Helping others heal. Gene squeezed her hand. Your mother would be proud of you. She'd be proud of you too, Dad. You kept your promise. You protected me. I'll always protect you. That's not a promise. That's a fact. They went inside together, and Gene thought about the future. There would be more documentaries, more investigations, more fights. But for now, he had his daughter back. She was safe. She was healing. And the people who'd hurt her were paying for it. That was enough. For now, that was enough. 6 months later, Gene received a letter. It was from Brent Sparks, sent from federal prison. Gene almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won. The letter was short. You think you've won. But you've only made things worse for Leanne. People like us, we have long memories. My family has connections you can't imagine. When I get out, when we rebuild, we'll come for both of you. And this time, you won't see us coming. Gene read it twice. Then he lit his office fireplace, watched the letter burn, and made a phone call. Marcus? I have an idea for our next project. Another documentary? Something like that. How do you feel about investigating corruption in the federal prison system? Marcus laughed. You can't let it go, can you? Nope. Besides, I promised Brent I'd bury him. I keep my promises. Gene hung up and turned to his wall of research. He'd already started a new board, mapping connections between the Sparks family's remaining allies and associates. There were still loose ends, still people who'd helped them and hadn't been caught. Gene would find them all, because this was what he did. This was who he was. The Sparks family thought they'd broken Leanne. Instead, they'd awakened something in her father that couldn't be put back to sleep. Gene Mullins didn't just expose the truth. He hunted it down, cornered it, and made it impossible to hide. And he was just getting started. In the other room, Leanne was on the phone with Carolina, planning their support group's first meeting. She was laughing, hopeful, healing. That sound, his daughter's happiness, was worth everything. Worth the years of work, the danger, the moral compromises. Gene had learned a fundamental truth. The world was full of monsters who preyed on the vulnerable. Most people couldn't fight back. They didn't have the skills, the resources, or the will. But Gene did. And he'd keep fighting until there were no monsters left. Or until the monsters finally took him down. Either way, he'd go down swinging. Because some people deserve to be destroyed. And Gene Mullins was more than happy to be the one who did it. He looked at the new research board, at all the names and connections, and smiled. Who's next? He murmured. The war was over. Long live the war. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.